Hamilton, Montana, a small town at the foot of the Bitterroot Mountains with a population of just over 5,000, a place where everyone knows each other by name, where no one locks their doors at night, and where crime is usually limited to petty theft and speeding. November 2016 was unusually cold. The mountain peaks were covered with snow earlier than usual, and in the mornings the valley was shrouded in thick fog that only dissipated by noon. Emily Hawkins walked across the University of Montana campus, clutching her textbooks tightly to her chest. The wind ruffled her long brown hair, and her cheeks were flushed from the cold. The 22-year-old senior in the Department of Ecology and Natural Resources was rushing to her last lecture before the weekend. An honors student, a volunteer at a local animal shelter, and a hiking enthusiast, she was born and raised in Hamilton, where her parents, David and Margaret Hawkins, lived. After graduating from high school, Emily could have gone to any major university in the country, but she chose to stay in Montana, closer to her beloved mountains and family. Professor Rogers often spoke of her as one of his most promising students, intelligent, determined, with an exceptional sense of responsibility. Emily had already received offers from several environmental organizations for internships the following summer. She had a bright future ahead of her. Her best friend, Catherine Davis, always noted that Emily was the life of the party. She was never down, always supporting others. Everyone was drawn to her sunny smile and infectious laugh. On that Friday evening, November 18, 2016, there was no sign of trouble. The Parker family home on the outskirts of Hamilton was lit up with lights. Loud music, laughter, and voices came from the open windows. The traditional pre-Christmas party for senior students brought together about 40 people. Emily arrived around 8 p.m. in a good mood, wearing her favorite blue sweater and jeans. She hugged her friends, joked with her classmates, and danced to the latest hits. Ryan Parker, the host of the party, discussed Christmas plans with her. Emily talked about how she was going to Yellowstone with her parents. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation. She danced, socialized, laughed, giving no indication that this would be the last evening she would be seen alive. Around 11 p.m., Emily suddenly looked at her phone, frowned, and then her face lit up. She walked over to Ryan and said she needed to leave for a bit, but she would definitely be back. He nodded, not thinking much of it. Students often went outside for fresh air or to get more drinks. At 11:07 p.m., Emily sent a message to Catherine. "I'm going to the lake. I want to show you something amazing. Can you come in half an hour?" Catherine was busy talking to a guy she liked at the time, and didn't see the message until a few minutes later. At 11:12 p.m., she replied, "What's the mystery? Of course I'll be there. Is everything okay?" At 11:15 p.m., the last message from Emily arrived. "Everything's fine. I just don't want to talk in front of everyone. See you at the North Pier. Don't be late." Catherine didn't think much of it. Emily was sometimes a little spontaneous. She might call in the middle of the night to go see the stars or the sunrise. Catherine thought that maybe her friend had seen the northern lights or something else unusual. She decided to stay at the party a little longer and didn't arrive at the lake until around midnight. Springfield Lake is a popular vacation spot in the summer months, but in November, it's too cold to swim. In the evenings, it's deserted, with only the occasional couple seeking privacy or a lone fisherman. The North Pier was Emily's favorite spot. From here, there was a view of the mountains, and on a clear day, you could see the twinkling lights of Hamilton in the distance. As she drove up to the lake, the first thing Catherine noticed was how cold and quiet it was. The parking lot was empty, with only the silhouette of a car visible in the distance. Catherine headed for the North Pier, lighting the way with her phone's flashlight. There was no one near the pier. The surface of the water was black in the darkness of the night, and a light breeze created ripples that reflected the moonlight. "Emily?" Catherine called, but there was only silence in response. At 12:23 a.m., not finding her friend by the lake, Catherine called her. She heard the familiar ringtone coming from somewhere nearby. Emily's phone was ringing, but there was no answer. After several attempts, Catherine walked around the area around the pier and headed for the parking lot. In the light of her phone's flashlight, she spotted a familiar car, Emily's blue Ford Focus, in the nearly empty parking lot. Catherine's heart sank with sudden fear. She approached the car and found that the doors were unlocked. The keys were in the ignition, and Emily's bag and phone were on the passenger seat. But Emily herself was nowhere to be seen. Catherine looked around, called out to her friend again, even looked in the trunk. Nothing. No signs of a struggle, no signs that anything had gone wrong. It looked as if Emily had simply gotten out of the car and disappeared. With trembling hands, Catherine immediately called the police, then Emily's parents. By 2 o'clock in the morning, several patrol cars were already working at the scene. Ray Valley County Sheriff Michael Baker personally led the investigation. By dawn, a large-scale search operation had been organized, joined by dozens of volunteers from Hamilton. Emily's parents, David and Margaret, arrived at the lake immediately after Catherine's call. Margaret, her eyes red from crying, sat in her daughter's car, holding her phone and repeating, "Where are you, my girl? Where are you?" David Hawkins, a tall man with gray hair at his temples, looked as if he had aged 10 years overnight. He persistently questioned the police, demanding answers they did not have. Over the next 3 days, the area around Springfield Lake was thoroughly searched. Divers checked the lake, and dog handlers combed through the woods, but Emily seemed to have vanished into thin air. Her phone last connected to the network at 11:17 p.m. in the lake area, after which the connection was lost. On November 21st, Sheriff Baker held a press conference and announced that the police had no evidence to suggest foul play. Emily had left no note, nothing to indicate her intention to disappear. All possible scenarios were considered, from an accident to voluntary departure and, unfortunately, possible kidnapping. "My daughter would never have left voluntarily without telling us. Never," David Hawkins told reporters after the press conference. "She was a responsible person. She cared for her parents. She had no problems, nothing that would make her run away. Someone took our girl, and I will find that person, no matter what it takes." The story of Emily Hawkins' disappearance quickly spread beyond Hamilton. Local news channels and newspapers published daily reports on the progress of the investigation. Social media was flooded with the hashtag #FindEmily. Volunteers set up a command center at a local church, from which they organized search parties. During the initial investigation, police interviewed all of the party guests and checked surveillance footage from gas stations and stores along Emily's possible route. It was determined that shortly before her disappearance, Emily received a phone call, after which she decided to go to the lake. Detective Alex Rodriguez, a young but experienced investigator from the sheriff's office, studied the call details in detail. At 10:53 p.m., Emily received a call from an unknown number, and the conversation lasted just over a minute. It was not possible to determine who had called, but there was every reason to believe that it was this call that prompted her to go to the lake. The longer Emily remained missing, the more tension grew in the city. Her parents stayed up all night, her friends organized new searches every weekend, and the police checked every possible lead. But days turned into weeks, and there was still no sign of Emily. A makeshift memorial with photos, flowers, and candles appeared near the university campus. Students and teachers brought notes with wishes and prayers. No one wanted to believe the worst, but with each passing day, hope faded. A month had passed since Emily Hawkins disappeared. Snow covered the shores of Lake Springfield, and on Christmas Eve, Hamilton was decorated with festive lights. But for the Hawkins family, time seemed to have stopped. Their daughter, sister, and friend seemed to have vanished into the cold November air, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a hope that grew more fragile with each passing day. Every evening, Margaret Hawkins ran her hand over her daughter's untouched room, where everything remained as it had been on the day of her disappearance. Textbooks on the desk, an unfinished book on the bedside table, photographs on the walls. Every morning I wake up and for a brief moment I forget what happened. And then reality hits me again. she told her neighbors who came to support the family. "But I won't give up. We will find our girl. I know she is out there somewhere, and she knows we are looking for her." The first rays of the winter sun barely broke through the thick clouds as the search operation resumed with renewed vigor. The day after Emily Hawkins disappeared, additional units from neighboring counties arrived in Hamilton. Sheriff Baker set up a command post in a small pavilion by Springfield Lake. Tables with maps, radios, thermoses of hot coffee. It all created an atmosphere of military action. By 6 in the morning, more than 100 volunteers had lined up, ready to comb the woods around the lake. People of all ages and professions, university students, farmers, doctors, teachers, had come to help. Each was given a bright vest, a whistle, and a flashlight. The officers divided them into groups and assigned each a specific area. "Look for anything that might be connected to Emily," Deputy Sheriff Stevens instructed them. "Items of clothing, personal belongings, signs of a struggle on the ground. If you see anything suspicious, don't touch it. Whistle and wait for an officer. Don't leave the group." Snow was forecast for today, and visibility could deteriorate. David Hawkins insisted on joining one of the search parties, despite the pleas of his wife and the sheriff. His face, haggard from a sleepless night, expressed a mixture of despair and determination. "I can't just sit and wait," he said. "I have to do something. I have to find my daughter." Margaret stayed at the command post, helping to coordinate the volunteers and answering calls from reporters. Her hands trembled as she handed out flyers with Emily's photo, but her voice remained steady. Meanwhile, divers from the Montana State Rescue Service were working on the lake. The water was cold, around 5 degrees Celsius. Visibility underwater was no more than a meter, which made the search much more difficult. Each diver went down for 20 minutes, then was replaced by the next. By lunchtime, they had searched almost the entire northern shore of the lake, but found nothing related to the missing girl. Sergeant Roy McKenzie, a veteran rescue worker with 15 years of experience, shook his head as he climbed out of the water after another dive. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. If she had drowned, we would have found some signs. Dog handlers with search dogs also combed the area. The dogs were given Emily's sweater to sniff so they could pick up a scent. One of the Labradors confidently led the team from the parking lot to the North Pier, but the trail ended there. It was as if the girl had simply vanished without a trace. Detectives Rodriguez and Parker, meanwhile, were studying the surveillance camera footage. Unfortunately, there were no cameras in the parking lot by the lake, but they reviewed footage from nearby gas stations and stores on the way from the Parker's house to the lake. One of the recordings showed Emily's blue Ford Focus passing a Shell gas station at 11:09 p.m. Emily was alone at the wheel, and she didn't look worried or scared. She was driving very calmly, Rodriguez noted. No one was following her, and she was alone in the car. Whatever happened, it happened at the lake. The longer the search continued without results, the more the tension grew. On the third day after her disappearance, the first snow fell, which significantly complicated the work of the search teams. Any traces that might have remained on the ground were now hidden under a white blanket. At this point, investigators began to actively consider the possibility of intentional kidnapping or murder. Detectives compiled a list of people Emily had been in contact with in recent months and began checking each one. First on the list was Jason Turner, Emily's ex-boyfriend. They had been dating for almost 2 years, but broke up 3 months before her disappearance. According to friends, Emily was the one who initiated the breakup, and Jason took the breakup hard. Jason, a 25-year-old engineering graduate, was now working for a construction company in Missoula, a 40-minute drive from Hamilton. When detectives arrived at his home, he appeared genuinely shocked by the news of his ex-girlfriend's disappearance. "Emily's gone? When? How?" His voice trembled and his face turned pale. During the initial interview, Jason claimed that on the night of Emily's disappearance, he was in Missoula at the Blue Grizzly Bar with friends and then stayed overnight at one of their homes. When detectives asked why he didn't attend the Parkers' party, Even though he knew many of the guests, Jason nervously ran his hand through his hair. Emily and I had a difficult breakup. I thought it would be better that way. I didn't want to create an awkward situation. Emily's friends told a different story. Catherine Davis recalled an argument she witnessed a few weeks before the disappearance. Jason was waiting for her near the library. They were arguing heatedly. I heard him say, "You'll regret this." Emily was very upset after that conversation. Another friend, Lisa Morrison, told detectives that Jason had called Emily several times late at night, and once she saw his car parked in front of the Hawkins house. He didn't want to let her go. Emily said he kept texting her, asking her to come back. It was obsessive. Suspicions intensified when police found dozens of missed calls from Jason on Emily's phone over the past month, and several messages asking to meet. The last message was sent 2 days before her disappearance. "We need to talk. It's important. Please give me a chance to explain." David Hawkins, upon learning of the suspicions about Jason, flew into a rage. "I always knew there was something wrong with that guy," he told Sheriff Baker. "He was too possessive, controlling her every move." Emily hesitated for a long time before breaking up with him. When the detectives came to Jason for the second time, they were more serious. They checked his alibi and found inconsistencies. Several witnesses confirmed that they had seen him at the Blue Grizzly Bar on the evening of November 18th, but he had left the bar around 10:30 p.m. and had not stayed there all night, as he had initially claimed. "Yes, I left early," Jason admitted during the second interrogation. "I was upset. I drank a lot. I needed some fresh air. I went home and went to bed." "Can anyone confirm that you were at home?" asked Detective Rodriguez. Jason turned pale. "No. I live alone. But I swear, I had nothing to do with Emily's disappearance. I still love her. I would never hurt her." The detectives obtained a search warrant for Jason's apartment and car. They looked for any clues that could link him to Emily's disappearance. Hair, blood, personal items. They also checked surveillance camera footage along the route between Missoula and Hamilton to determine whether Jason could have driven to Springfield Lake on the night of her disappearance. Jason Turner became the prime suspect. He was questioned several times, and all his contacts and movements were investigated. However, there was not enough evidence to press charges. Nothing suspicious was found in his apartment or car. Analysis of cell phone towers showed that his phone was in Missoula all night, and a camera at a gas station in Lolo, a town between Missoula and Hamilton, recorded his car heading home at 11:15 p.m., around the same time Emily was at the lake. "I don't think it's him," Sheriff Baker said after a week of intensive investigation. "Sure, he has a motive, and his initial lie about where he was raises questions, but we have nothing to link him to Springfield Lake that night." The search operation continued. Every weekend, volunteers gathered at the lake, expanding the search area. Photos of Emily and appeals for help were circulated on social media. Margaret and David Hawkins appeared on local television, begging anyone who might know something to come forward. "Our daughter is a kind, bright person," Margaret said in a trembling voice. "She has never hurt anyone. Please, if you know anything, say something. We just want her back home." Meanwhile, investigators began to explore other possibilities. A hypothesis was put forward about a possible attack by a random criminal or a serial killer. Detectives searched the database of unsolved crimes in neighboring counties and states, looking for similar cases. The possibility of voluntary departure was also considered. Perhaps Emily had decided to start a new life somewhere far from Montana. Her bank accounts were checked. No large withdrawals before her disappearance. Airports and bus stations were checked. No one had seen a girl resembling Emily. Her passport was left at home, in a dresser drawer. By the end of the second week of searching, the intensity of the operation began to decline. There were fewer and fewer volunteers, and the media gradually lost interest in the story. Life in Hamilton slowly returned to normal, although Emily's disappearance remained the main topic of conversation in cafes and shops. For the Hawkins family, time stood still. David took time off work and spent most of his days putting up posters and talking to people. Margaret hardly left the house, spending hours in her daughter's room, going through her things as if hoping to find some clue. "The worst thing is the uncertainty," she told her sister, who had come from Seattle to support them. "If I knew she was alive, I would wait as long as necessary. If I knew she was gone, I could at least begin to grieve. But this way, I'm just stuck. We're all stuck." A month after her disappearance, detectives admitted that the investigation had reached a dead end. They had no body, no clear evidence, and no witnesses. Jason Turner remained a suspect, but it was impossible to press charges against him. "We're not closing the case," Sheriff Baker assured the Hawkins family. "We'll continue to work on it, but I have to admit that we've run out of active leads. Right now, all we can do is wait for new information." David Hawkins wasn't ready to accept that. He hired a private investigator, a former police officer from Billings, to conduct an independent investigation. He called Emily's friends, asking them about the smallest details of her life in the last weeks before her disappearance. "I'll find you, baby," he whispered, looking at a photo of his daughter before going to sleep. "I promise I will." And in the dark waters of Lake Springfield, hidden beneath the winter ice, lay secrets yet to be revealed. But for now, the residents of Hamilton could only speculate and hope that one day they would learn the truth about the fate of Emily Hawkins. Time has a strange property. It continues to move forward, even when it seems that the world has stopped. Day after day, week after week, month after month passed in Hamilton after Emily Hawkins' disappearance. Snow gave way to spring rains, then came a hot summer, then autumn again, and then winter again. The relentless cycle of seasons continued as if nothing had happened. 6 months later, the investigation was officially classified as unsolved. Sheriff Baker personally informed the Hawkins family of this, sitting at their kitchen table with a cup of untouched coffee. "This doesn't mean we're giving up the search," he explained, avoiding Margaret's gaze. "We've just run out of active leads. We'll continue to process any new information as soon as it comes in." David Hawkins, gaunt and visibly aged, clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "You're giving up," he said quietly, but with fury in his voice. "My daughter is out there somewhere, and you're just giving up." "Mr. Hawkins, we've exhausted all possibilities. We've interviewed over 200 people, checked every surveillance camera within a 50-mile radius, combed the lake area 5 times. Jason Turner has taken 2 polygraph tests." "And you believed him?" David interrupted. "We have no grounds to hold him. No physical evidence, no witnesses. I understand your frustration, but the laws..." Margaret quietly placed her hand on her husband's shoulder, stopping him from another outburst of anger. Her eyes were dry. It was as if she had cried all her tears over the past few months. "We understand, Sheriff," she said quietly. "Thank you for everything you've done. But we won't stop. We'll never stop until we find our girl." That night, after the sheriff left, Margaret sat in her daughter's room for a long time, looking through Emily's photo albums. Emily at 3 years old with ice cream on her nose. Emily in her school uniform on her first day of school. Emily fishing with her father. Emily at her school graduation, beaming with happiness. "I'll find you," Margaret whispered, pressing her daughter's photo to her chest. "I promise I'll find you." That promise was a turning point for Margaret Hawkins. Instead of sinking into despair, she found a new purpose. If the system couldn't find her daughter, she would create her own system. A month after talking to the sheriff, Margaret founded the organization Find Them, Montana Missing Persons Project. Starting with a small Facebook page and a few volunteers, she quickly turned the initiative into a serious movement. Margaret conducted awareness campaigns in schools, teaching children safety rules. She organized search parties to help families whose loved ones had gone missing. She coordinated with similar organizations in neighboring states. She became the voice of those who had lost hope and a beacon for those who still believed. Missing people are not just statistics, not just cases in files, she said at meetings. They are someone's children, parents, brothers, and sisters. Each of them deserves to be searched for with the same passion with which I search for Emily. David supported his wife, even though his path was different. He continued to work as a private investigator, whom he had hired to conduct his own investigation. Every week, they met in a small office on the outskirts of Hamilton, laying out photographs, notes, and maps on the table. David never gave up hope of finding his daughter alive. In his office at work, there was a map of the United States covered with red pins, places where he thought Emily might be. He regularly checked hospitals, homeless shelters, and psychiatric clinics, looking for girls with memory loss, unidentified patients, anyone who could be his daughter. On the first anniversary of Emily's disappearance, November 18, 2017, the Hawkins family organized a memorial service at Springfield Lake. More than 200 people came with flashlights and candles. They stood silently around the North Pier, where the girl had disappeared a year ago. After sunset, people set small paper boats with burning candles afloat. Hundreds of lights slowly floated across the dark surface of the lake, while Margaret read a poem written especially for this day. By that time, most of Hamilton's residents had come to terms with the idea that Emily was dead. Although her body had never been found, the statistics were relentless. The chances of finding a missing person alive after a year of absence were rapidly approaching zero. But no one said this out loud in front of the Hawkins family. In the second year after Emily's disappearance, the University of Montana, where she had studied, established the annual Emily Hawkins Scholarship at the initiative of her parents. It was awarded to students in the Department of Ecology who demonstrated exceptional leadership qualities and a commitment to protecting nature, everything that Emily herself valued so much. At the ceremony announcing the first scholarship recipient, David and Margaret Hawkins stood on stage, holding hands, as the dean of the faculty gave a speech. Emily Hawkins was a shining example of what a true defender of nature should be: passionate, dedicated, ready to act. This scholarship will ensure that her spirit and values live on in future generations of students. For the Hawkins family, the scholarship was a way to preserve the memory of their daughter and ensure that her name would not be forgotten. Every year, they met with the scholarship recipients in person, told them about Emily, and showed them photos of her wildlife conservation projects. Meanwhile, the city of Hamilton slowly returned to normal life. New events and new stories gradually pushed Emily's tragedy out of everyday conversation. People stopped looking over their shoulders when walking near the lake. Parents once again allowed their children to play outside unsupervised. But the memory of the missing girl did not disappear completely. Over time, the story became overgrown with rumors and speculation, turning into a dark urban legend. Teenagers told each other scary stories around the campfire about the ghost of a girl in a blue sweater who appears on the North Pier on moonless nights. They say that if you come to the lake on the anniversary of her disappearance and call her name 3 times, you can hear her last scream, they whispered, scaring each other. Some locals swore they had seen a strange light over the water on November nights, or heard a woman's cry coming from the North Shore. Tourists visiting Hamilton often asked about the girl from the lake. The story had spread far beyond the small town. Jason Turner, Emily's ex-boyfriend, couldn't handle the pressure after months of questioning and suspicion and left Montana. He moved to Portland, changed jobs, and, according to rumors, even changed his name. Some still thought he was guilty, even though no evidence had ever been found. For many Hamilton residents, he will forever remain the man who must know something. By the beginning of the 3rd year after the disappearance, Margaret Hawkins' organization had grown to several branches across the state. She regularly appeared on television, gave interviews to newspapers, and spoke at schools and colleges. Her story inspired others not to give up, to fight for the truth, to search for missing loved ones. One cold February evening, Margaret returned home after a speech in Billings. David was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing another report from a private investigator. His once dark hair was now completely gray, and deep wrinkles furrowed his face. "How did it go?" he asked, without looking up from the papers. "Good. A lot of people came. 2 parents of missing children agreed to join the organization," Margaret replied, taking off her coat. She walked over to her husband and kissed him lightly on the top of his head. "Found anything new?" David shook his head. "Nothing. Same as usual." He put down the papers and rubbed his tired eyes. "Sometimes I think maybe we should accept that she's not coming back. Maybe it's time to say goodbye?" Margaret froze. In 3 years, this was the first time David had talked about giving up hope. "Do you really believe that?" she asked quietly. David was silent for a long time, then slowly shook his head. "No, I don't. I feel like I know we'll find the answers. It's just hard sometimes." Margaret sat down next to him and took his hand. "I know, dear. It's hard for me too. But we can't give up. Not now. Emily deserves to know the truth, no matter what happens." That night, they sat in the kitchen for a long time, remembering their daughter, crying and laughing at stories from her childhood. It was a kind of therapy they did regularly, remembering Emily not as a missing girl, a victim of an unknown crime, but as a living, vibrant person whom they loved endlessly. The 3rd anniversary of Emily's disappearance was unusually cold. The memorial service by the lake was shorter than usual because of the icy wind. People quickly dispersed, rushing to the warmth of their homes. Only the Hawkins family and a few close friends remained at the North Pier until dark. After the service, Margaret and David met with Sheriff Baker at his office, another tradition that had become established over the years. Every year, the sheriff confirmed that the case remained open, that they had not forgotten about Emily. "I know this isn't what you want to hear," he said, handing them a folder with copies of the reports from the past year. "But no new leads have come up. We followed up on several anonymous calls, but they all turned out to be false leads." Margaret nodded. She had long since given up hoping for a miracle from these meetings, but she appreciated the efforts of the sheriff and his team, their unwillingness to close the case despite the lack of progress. "Thank you, Sheriff," she said. "We understand you're doing everything you can." As they left the sheriff's office, Margaret and David had no idea that in a few months, their lives would be turned upside down again. That a chance discovery at an abandoned sawmill would shatter the fragile balance they had worked so hard to achieve over the past 3 years. That their long journey in search of the truth would finally lead to answers, but those answers would be more terrifying than anything they could have imagined. For now, they walked through the snow-covered streets of Hamilton, holding hands tightly, carrying with them the weight of another year without their daughter, another year of silence and uncertainty. Spring 2020 in Montana was early and rainy. After a harsh winter, the residents of Hamilton rejoiced in the first rays of warm sunshine, blooming flowers, and fresh spring air. Nature was reborn, giving hope for new beginnings. 30 miles from the city, in the foothills of the Bitterroot Range, stood the abandoned Pine Ridge Sawmill. It had once been the heart of the region's forestry industry, providing jobs for hundreds of local residents. But in the early 2000s, the company went bankrupt, and the building had stood empty for nearly 2 decades. Time and nature gradually destroyed the once bustling enterprise. The roof partially collapsed, the walls were covered with graffiti, and weeds and young trees grew around it. In March 2020, a development company from Missoula acquired the site with plans to renovate it. The old sawmill building was to be converted into an eco-friendly tourist complex with a restaurant, museum, and guest houses. The first stage of the work was to dismantle dangerous structures and clear the site. On the cool morning of April 17th, a crew of 5 construction workers arrived at the site. They were tasked with dismantling part of the concrete foundation of an old warehouse that had been added to the main building in the 1990s. The work was supervised by Mike Peterson, an experienced foreman with 20 years of experience in the construction industry. "Today we're working on this extension," he said, pointing to the dilapidated concrete structure. "According to the documents, it was built in a hurry, without proper approval. There may be quality issues, so we're proceeding with caution." The workers set to work, using jackhammers to break up the concrete floor. The work progressed slowly due to the unexpected strength of the structure. By noon, they had cleared only a small portion. "Strange," remarked Tim Collins, one of the workers, wiping sweat from his forehead. "This concrete is much denser than it should be. It's as if it was reinforced on purpose." In the afternoon, Tim was working in the far corner of the extension when the jackhammer suddenly sank deeper than it should have. "Hey, Mike!" he shouted. "Something's wrong with the foundation here. It looks like a cavity." Peterson came over to check. Sure enough, beneath the top layer of concrete was an empty space that wasn't marked on any of the building plans. The foreman ordered the hole to be enlarged so they could get a better look at the discovery. Half an hour later, they had enlarged the hole to a size that allowed them to peer inside. Peterson shone his flashlight into the darkness. What he saw made him recoil and drop the flashlight. "Call the police," he said in a low voice. "Right away." In the makeshift underground chamber, encased in concrete on all sides, were human remains. Within an hour, the sawmill area was cordoned off. 3 patrol cars from the county sheriff's office, a forensic van, and Sheriff Baker himself arrived. They were followed by the car of the county medical examiner, Dr. Elizabeth Chen. Baker, who had aged noticeably over the years, with gray hair and new wrinkles around his eyes, personally directed the operation. He remembered every detail of the Emily Hawkins case, one of the biggest disappointments of his career. The forensic experts carefully enlarged the hole and removed the remains, which were in a heavy plastic bag. A preliminary examination showed that the body had been dismembered. Dr. Chen, after examining the find on the spot, confirmed that the remains were those of a young woman, presumably between 20 and 25 years old. Death had occurred several years ago, but a more accurate determination would be possible after a complete laboratory examination. "Judging by the condition of the remains and the method of concealment, this is definitely a murder," she told the sheriff. "The body was deliberately dismembered and hidden in concrete." Sheriff Baker took off his hat and ran his hand through his thinning hair. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" he asked quietly. "Emily Hawkins." Dr. Chen nodded. "The age fits, the time frame fits, but we need a DNA test to confirm it." "Do you have samples?" "Yes, we took them from the parents for the missing persons database. I'll request an urgent comparison." News of the discovery at the sawmill spread through Hamilton like wildfire. By evening, a crowd of onlookers and journalists had gathered at the police cordon. The local radio station interrupted its regular programming for a special news bulletin. Margaret and David Hawkins learned of the discovery from a reporter who called their home asking for comment. Shocked and confused, they immediately contacted Sheriff Baker. "We cannot confirm the identity of the deceased until we receive the DNA test results," the sheriff said cautiously. "But I feel it is my duty to warn you that there is reason to believe it may be Emily." Margaret stood motionless, holding her husband's hand as the sheriff spoke these words on the phone. 3 years of hope, searching, sleepless nights, and now, perhaps, the terrible answer had been found in the concrete sarcophagus of an abandoned sawmill. "We want to be there," David said firmly. "When the results come in, we have a right to know first." The sheriff agreed. He knew these people, had seen their suffering, respected their strength and resilience. They deserved to hear the truth in person, not from the news or their neighbors. The next 48 hours turned into agonizing waiting for the Hawkins family. Margaret mechanically went about her daily chores as if in a fog. David sat for hours on the porch, staring at the mountains in the distance, smoking one cigarette after another, even though he had quit the habit years ago. Meanwhile, at the county medical examiner's office, Dr. Chen and her team worked almost non-stop. They examined every detail of the gruesome discovery. The body had been professionally dismembered into 8 pieces, indicating that the killer had some anatomical knowledge. The cause of death was difficult to determine due to the condition of the remains, but damage consistent with strangulation was found on the cervical vertebrae. Police forensic experts thoroughly examined the site where the body was found. They took samples of concrete and dust and looked for any traces that might have survived over the years. Using special equipment, they discovered microscopic blood spatters on the walls that were invisible to the naked eye. On April 20th, at exactly 10 a.m., Margaret and David Hawkins arrived at the sheriff's office. They were escorted to the conference room, where Sheriff Baker, Dr. Chen, and District Attorney James Morrison were already waiting. The Hawkins immediately understood the answer from the looks on their faces. "We have the DNA test results," the sheriff said quietly. "The remains found at the sawmill belong to Emily. I'm so sorry." Margaret closed her eyes. Somewhere deep inside, part of her had always known that her daughter was dead. But another part, the part that made her wake up every morning, continue the search, and found organizations still hoped for a miracle. Now there was no hope left. David hugged his wife tightly, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. For the first time in 3 years, the uncertainty was over. With it went the last of his hope. "How?" David began, but his voice failed him. He cleared his throat and tried again. "How did this happen? Do you know who did this?" Dr. Chen carefully laid out the facts, avoiding the most disturbing details. It appears that death was caused by asphyxiation, suffocation. No other serious injuries were found prior to death. Post-mortem injuries. She paused, searching for the right words. The body was dismembered after death, presumably to facilitate transportation and concealment. Judging by the condition of the remains and the level of decomposition, death occurred approximately 3 to 4 years ago, which corresponds to the time of Emily's disappearance, added the sheriff. As for the second question, we don't have a suspect yet. But now that we've found the body, the investigation is moving to a new level. The sheriff explained to the family that he was reopening the case with full force. Now they had physical evidence, a crime scene, and new technological capabilities that weren't available 3 years ago. "We've already sent samples to the FBI for further analysis. Their lab can detect traces of DNA where we cannot. In addition, we are investigating the history of the sawmill and everyone who had access to it during the period of Emily's disappearance." Prosecutor Morrison, who had been silent until then, added, "I promise you that when we find the killer, he will receive the maximum punishment. There is no statute of limitations on this crime, and we will allocate all the necessary resources to solve it." After the meeting, Margaret and David sat in their car in the police station parking lot for a while, unable to move. For 3 years, they had lived in limbo between hope and despair. Now it was time to grieve. "We need to call Lisa," Margaret finally said, referring to her sister in Seattle. "And your parents, and prepare a statement for the press. They'll find out soon." David nodded, staring straight ahead. "And then we need to arrange a funeral. A real funeral." That same day, Sheriff Baker held a press conference confirming the discovery of Emily Hawkins's remains and the reopening of the investigation into her murder. The news instantly became the top story in the region, even making it into the national media. The story of a girl who disappeared 3 years ago and was found in a concrete sarcophagus in an abandoned sawmill shocked the public. The following weeks turned into a whirlwind of activity for investigators. Every aspect of Emily Hawkins' life was re-examined, every acquaintance was questioned, and every detail of her last day was analyzed using new methods and technologies. Particular attention was paid to the sawmill. The building had not been in operation since 2003, but records of sporadic use of the storage facilities and renovation work were found in the owner company's documents. The annex where Emily's body was found was built in 2014 as a temporary storage facility for equipment, but construction was not actually completed until early 2017. just a few months after the girl's disappearance. Records showed that a small crew of 3 people worked on the final stage of construction. 2 of them have since died, and the third, Ray Summers, has moved to Idaho. Detectives immediately contacted the Boise police to question Summers. Meanwhile, forensic scientists found microscopic traces of sweat on the plastic bag containing the remains. Using a new DNA analysis technique available only in a few laboratories in the country, they were able to isolate genetic material that did not belong to the victim. The profile was uploaded to a federal database to search for matches. At the same time, while examining Emily's phone records from the day of her disappearance, investigators focused on a mysterious call from an unidentified number that came in at 10:53 p.m. Using new tracking and data recovery technologies, they discovered that the call had been made from a disposable phone purchased with cash at a Walmart store in Missoula 3 days earlier. The store's surveillance cameras had recorded the transaction, but the quality was too poor to reliably identify the buyer. Margaret and David Hawkins maintained their dignity during this period, despite their renewed pain. They organized a funeral attended by hundreds of people. Instead of a traditional burial, they decided to cremate their daughter's remains and scatter her ashes over her favorite places in the Bitterroot Mountains. At the memorial service, held in the university chapel, Emily's friends, teachers, and neighbors spoke. They recalled her laughter, her kindness, her desire to help others, and her love of nature. Margaret, summoning all her strength, also gave a speech. "We searched for Emily for 3 years, not knowing if she was alive. Now we know that she is no longer with us. But this is not the end. It is a new beginning, the beginning of the road to justice. My daughter deserves justice, and I swear I will not rest until I find out who took her from us." In her organization, Find Them, Margaret created a new division specializing in helping families whose missing loved ones had been found dead. She understood better than anyone that such families need special support. On April 28th, almost 2 weeks after the body was found, Sheriff Baker received an urgent call from the FBI laboratory. The results of the extended DNA analysis were ready, and they contained shocking information. "We found a match," said specialist Susan Lee. "It's partial, but pretty convincing. The DNA from the crime scene belongs to a man who is closely related to one of the profiles in our database. We're talking about a 2011 case from Oregon, rape with grievous bodily harm. The suspect was acquitted due to lack of evidence, but his DNA remained in the system. His name is Brian Montgomery, brother of Robert Montgomery," the sheriff finished, feeling a chill run down his spine. Robert Montgomery, respected businessman, owner of the popular Mountain Spring restaurant in Hamilton, active participant in community life, sponsor of charitable causes, including searches for missing persons, a close friend of the Hawkins family, and one of the largest donors to Margaret's Find Them organization. Sheriff Baker slowly put down the phone, his mind racing. Could the man who had helped search for Emily all these years actually be the one who took her life? He remembered how often he had seen Montgomery at search events, comforting parents, promising help, donating money. The picture began to come together. Robert Montgomery was known for his construction projects in the region, including the restoration of historic buildings. He had access to building materials and knowledge of construction. And, as the sheriff suddenly remembered, one of his companies was involved in the preservation of the very sawmill where the body was found. Baker immediately called an emergency meeting of the investigation team. It was necessary to check all of Montgomery's connections and gather additional evidence before taking any action. There was too much at stake to risk scaring off the suspect. That same evening, detectives began covert surveillance of Robert Montgomery. His phone calls were tapped, his email was monitored, and all his movements were tracked. Investigators worked day and night, checking every detail of his life over the past few years. Meanwhile, at his home on the outskirts of Hamilton, Robert Montgomery was calmly eating dinner, unaware that the hunt had already begun and that the truth about what happened to Emily Hawkins on that cold November night in 2016 would soon come to light. The first days of May 2020 in Hamilton were warm and sunny. The city's residents took to the streets to enjoy the spring air, unaware that Sheriff Baker's investigation team was closing in on the mystery that had haunted their community for more than 3 years. Robert Montgomery, the 52-year-old owner of the Mountain Key restaurant, was a well-known figure in Hamilton. Tall, fit, with a neatly trimmed graying beard and a warm smile, he gave the impression of a successful businessman and community leader. His restaurant was considered the best in town, and his annual charity dinners raised significant amounts of money for various local initiatives. After Emily Hawkins disappeared, Robert became one of the most active supporters of the search campaign. He provided his restaurant as a headquarters for volunteers, donated money, and personally participated in the search. Over time, he became close to the Hawkins family, becoming a source of support and comfort for them. When Margaret founded the organization, Find Them, Robert joined the board of directors and became one of its biggest sponsors. No one could have imagined that behind the facade of a respectable citizen lurked a cold-blooded killer. Investigators set up round-the-clock surveillance on Montgomery. A team of technical specialists studied his phone calls, emails, and financial records. Detectives secretly interviewed former employees of his companies and checked his alibi on the day of Emily's disappearance. On May 5th, there was a breakthrough. Ray Summers, a former construction worker who worked at a sawmill, admitted that in December 2016, Robert Montgomery personally paid him $50,000 in cash for urgent repairs to the foundation of an extension. Montgomery insisted that the work be done without documentation or official permits. He said it was a simple crack repair, but he forbade me to look under the slabs, Summers recalled. He said he had everything ready, I just had to pour the concrete. The money was good, so I didn't ask any questions. This information, combined with DNA test results linking Montgomery to Emily's remains, gave investigators sufficient grounds to obtain a search warrant for his home and restaurant. Early in the morning on May 7th, a task force from the county sheriff's office conducted simultaneous raids on both locations. At Montgomery's home, an elegant colonial-style mansion on the outskirts of town, the search revealed a carefully concealed secret room in the basement. What they found there shocked even the most seasoned detectives. The walls of the room were covered with photographs of young women, dozens, if not hundreds of pictures. Many of them had been taken secretly, through windows or from a distance. Among them were numerous images of Emily Hawkins, Emily on campus, Emily in a cafe, Emily out jogging. On a separate table lay an album dedicated exclusively to her, with newspaper clippings about her disappearance, personal items, and even a lock of her hair. In a safe hidden under the floorboards, investigators found Montgomery's diaries, 10 thick notebooks filled with small handwriting. They described in detail his obsession with young women, especially Emily. The entries became increasingly disturbing as the date of her disappearance approached. She is perfect, pure, bright. She must be mine forever before the world corrupts her, read one of the last entries before the girl's disappearance. In Montgomery's private office at the restaurant, forensic investigators found a stash of disposable phones, surgical instruments, and anatomy books. They also found a folder with information about the Pine Ridge sawmill, including detailed plans of the extension where the body was found. Robert Montgomery was arrested at his restaurant during the lunch shift. He did not resist, remaining ice-cold and calm. The only thing he said upon his arrest was, "I preserved her beauty forever. No one understands." The news of Montgomery's arrest had the effect of a bombshell in Hamilton. People gathered in the streets, in cafes, in bars. Everyone was discussing the shocking news. How could a respected businessman, philanthropist, and friend of the victim's family turn out to be a cold-blooded killer? How could he look Emily's parents in the eye for 3 years, helping with the search, knowing that he himself had taken their daughter's life? Sheriff Baker's press conference was broadcast live on all local channels. "We are convinced that Robert Montgomery not only killed Emily Hawkins, but also carefully planned this crime," the sheriff said. He deliberately befriended the victim's family in order to control the investigation and obtain first-hand information. Interrogations of the suspect and analysis of the evidence allowed investigators to reconstruct the events of that fateful night on November 18, 2016. Montgomery, who had been obsessed with Emily for a long time, had been stalking her for several months. He learned about the party at the Parkers' house and devised a plan. Using a disposable phone, he called Emily, introducing himself as an employee of an environmental organization that was considering her for an internship. He arranged an urgent meeting at Springfield Lake, saying he wanted to discuss an important project to preserve the local ecosystem. Unsuspecting Emily arrived at the lake. There, Montgomery attacked her, strangled her, and took her body away in his SUV to an abandoned sawmill, where he had prepared a place in advance. Using his knowledge of anatomy, he dismembered the body and encased it in concrete, planning to build an extension to hide the traces of the crime. For the Hawkins family, the news that their daughter's killer was a man they trusted, who hugged them, comforted them, and promised to help, was a devastating blow. "He was in our house," Margaret repeated in shock. "He looked us in the eye, knowing what he had done to our girl. How could a person be so monstrous?" During the subsequent investigation, investigators found evidence linking Montgomery to the disappearances of other young women in Idaho and Washington. His diaries contained references to 5 perfect ones, including Emily. Police from 3 states began working together to solve these crimes. Initial psychiatric evaluations showed that Montgomery suffered from a form of erotomania and narcissistic personality disorder. He fantasized about having special relationships with his victims and believed that by killing them, he was preserving their purity. On June 10, 2020, preliminary hearings began in the case of Robert Montgomery. The Ray Valley County courtroom was packed. Among those present were Margaret and David Hawkins, sitting in the front row, holding hands and staring straight ahead. The prosecutor presented extensive evidence, including DNA from the crime scene, diaries, witness testimony, and financial records of payments to Summers. Montgomery's lawyers attempted to build a defense based on his mental state, but the judge ruled that the case would go to trial by jury. As Montgomery was led out of the courtroom, David Hawkins stood up. Their eyes met, the grief-stricken father and the cold-blooded killer of his daughter. In that silent confrontation was all the pain, all the suffering, all the shattered hopes of recent years. In the weeks that followed, the public learned even more shocking details about Montgomery's double life. Former restaurant employees recounted his strange behavior, sudden disappearances, and outbursts of rage. His ex-wife confessed that she had left him because of his frightening tendencies and controlling behavior. Robert Montgomery's story became a warning about how easily a monster can hide behind a mask of respectability. For the residents of Hamilton, it was a bitter lesson that evil can lurk among them, smile at them, dine at the next table. For Margaret and David Hawkins, the arrest of their daughter's killer brought long-awaited answers, but not healing. Their lives had been forever changed, first by Emily's disappearance, then by years of agonizing uncertainty, and now by the horrific truth. "Justice for Emily won't bring her back to us," Margaret said at a meeting of her organization, Find Them, after Montgomery's arrest. "But it will help us continue to live, and we will continue our work so that other families can find the answers we sought." On September 14, 2020, the trial of Robert Montgomery began, attracting national media attention. The prosecution brought charges of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and desecration of a body. Preliminary charges were also brought in cases involving the disappearances of women in neighboring states.